6 months ago, I started out on a journey to create an athletics game, and here is how it's going. The inspiration for this game was based off Playman Summer Games, which was a game that I played when I was much younger, and also the World Olympics, and that is how the idea of the game started. So I started off with the most important part of the game, which is the controls. And for the controls, I decided to replicate the same controls that were used in Playman Summer Games, mainly because I think these controls were very easy to get used to, and they are very easy to mess up as well. See, you have to click these buttons as fast as you can while avoiding hitting the wrong button, because that would slow your speed down. And with that said, this is my first iteration of the controls, and the way it works is that you have to click on the button that appears on the screen at a particular time. Take for example, if the left button appears on the screen, you have to click with your mouse left button, and if it is the right button that appears, you have to click on the right mouse button, and that's just basically how it works. And then to make it more obvious as to what button you have to press, I changed the square to a circle, and then I gave it a little animation that plays anytime you hit the buttons. To see all of this in action, I created an FPS controller, and the speed at which the FPS controller moves is being determined by how fast the buttons are being pressed. Then I added a mixamo character to replace the capsule, then I gave it some animation, and I modeled a very small track to test out the movement. It was at this point that I decided to start working on opponent that the player can race against. To make this work, I created a state machine with 3 different states that the opponent can switch between. But the first state that I started working on was the running state, where the capsule has to follow a path by moving towards a cube, and once it reaches that cube, then it moves on to another one, and it just continues that way. Since I was able to get it working with the capsules, I decided to try it with the mixamo characters and some animations. Then I tried racing with the opponent that I had just made, and then I noticed that the opponent was jittering while running. And after some digging to find the solution, I discovered that it was the way that I was moving then. See, I'm using a transform-based movement, which doesn't work well with the way that I'm updating the speed of the player. When the opponent is about to start a race, its speed is at 0, but once it is free to run, the speed starts to increase little by little till it reaches its max speed, and I'm basically doing that just to simulate the way an athlete runs. But fortunately, this way of increasing the speed doesn't work with the transform-based movement that I'm using. I also tried using the nav mesh-based movement, which is Unity's AI system by default, but that didn't work either until I finally tried using the rigid body-based movement, and that works perfectly fine with no jittering at all. I also changed the path system for the opponent. Previously, I was using cubes, but then I saw this path creator tool that was created by Sebastian Lake. So I downloaded it, then set up the paths for each AI, and I made it work with my code, and the AI paths became more circular and more realistic. Moving on, I decided to get rid of the mixamo characters to model new ones that actually resemble athletes. And since my modeling skills are not very good, I decided to download a base model from Sketchfab. Then I sculpted head clothes, and then I gave the model some shoes, and my new characters were basically done. I imported them into Mixamo to rig them, and since they have the same rig with the Mixamo characters, the animation worked well with them in the game. So after creating these characters and making use of them in the game, I discovered that they were not optimized enough for the game. I mean, each one of them was about 60 to 75,000 vertices, which is very bad considering that a normal character model should not be exceeding 20 to 25,000 vertices for a PC game. So the best thing to do in this case is to create new ones, and this time around I decided to use an application called Make Human to create a base model with less vertices, and after sculpting the things that I needed on the base model, there were around 20 to 21,000 vertices, which I think is good enough for this game. I also did some modeling for the stadium structures and also added crowd to the game by using 2D billboards. With the new optimized characters added, I started working on the actual game events that are to be played in the game, and the first one has to be the 100 meters obviously, which will be the fastest event in the game. And initially the 100 meters started out from this round area of the track, which is very weird, but then I later changed it to a straight line track as it's supposed to be. So to beat the 100 meters, the player has to have a very good start by hitting the controls very fast right after the countdown timer says go, and maintaining that speed right from the start to the finish line. And I also added a scoreboard for when the race finishes to see how fast the player ran. The second game event I added was the 200 meters, which is the second fastest game event, and it is very similar to the 100 meters because the player has to be fast but has to be careful while moving around the curved area so as not to crawl into the opponent's line and get disqualified. I also worked on the 400 meters event, which will be the slowest game event, and unlike the 100 meters and the 200 meters, the player has to be slower this time around because the more you run, the more you lose stamina, and low stamina equals to low speed, which could make the player lose the race. But the best way to beat the 400 meter is to keep running along with your opponent. That way you can keep your stamina up, and when you are close to the end of the race, then you can speed up since you've preserved your stamina. And also the opponent's speed is increased when they reach a particular trigger point, which I made as well. Then I added the 100 meter hurdles, and it is one of the most difficult game events because the player has to run fast while timing every of its jump. So that means the player has to jump before reaching the hurdles. Also, if you are wondering how I made the AI to jump, remember the state machine that I talked about earlier? I programmed it to change the state to the jump state when it collides with a trigger point that is attached to the hurdles. Then it jumps and plays an animation, and that's how I made that work. The fourth game event I worked on is the long jump, and for this game event you have to run as fast as you can before stepping over the line. This way you can go far. The whole long jump system is made up of triggers, a checkpoint trigger which determines how far the player can jump based on the speed the player has before reaching the trigger point, and it also has a bad checkpoint trigger for when the player steps over the line, which causes disqualification. The last game event that I have added is the javelin mode, which the player has to run fast and maintain its speed until it reaches a point where it has to fill up a bar and then release the javelin. Basically, the speed the player has before releasing the javelin and the bar amount is what determines how far the javelin can go. This game event is also composed of triggers, a trigger for when you can start to fill up your bar, a trigger for when you can release the javelin, and also a trigger that helps to determine the distance the javelin can go. I also added a second camera that follows the javelin after it has been released, and also the speed of the player reduces when filling up the bar, and then the player stops when the javelin is released. That's my 6 months of working on this game. Obviously more work has been done to get the game up to this stage, but I can't talk about everything because if I do, this video would probably be 1 hour and I'm sure nobody would want to watch that. But I hope to keep working on the game and hopefully release it one day, but I've also got school to worry about. So progress is much slower, but I will try my best. And if you want to support me, the best way to do that is to subscribe to this channel so you can see more updates on the game. Also give this video a like, and I will see you some other time.